Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Global Market Insights series. I'm Christina Talaco. I'm the founder of South Dosi Fine Foods and also a board member of the Export Council of Australia, and I'll be moderating today's event. In the spirit of reconciliation, I will start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community, paying our respect to their elders, past and present, and extending that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. For those who are here for the first time, the Global Market Insights provide information from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Austrade, and also from the Australian exporters that are doing a lot of good work overseas on market intelligence, business conditions, risks, and opportunities in our key trading partner countries. Today, we'll be covering Thailand, which is Southeast Asia's second largest economy and very well placed at the center of most Asian countries. So once again, we have an excellent panel of experts who are on the ground and they understand the challenges and the opportunities for exporters to the Thai market. It's my great pleasure to have with us here His Excellency Alan McKinnon. He's Australia's ambassador to Thailand, and he's joining us from the Australian Embassy in Bangkok. Also, welcome to Michael Hellerman, the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner based at the Australian Consulate General in Bangkok. Our guests today from the private sector are Vinod Tiwari and Tony Pearson. Vinod is the Global Head of Business Development and Partnerships at Power Ledger. He's based in Perth, and he will share with us some insights on how his team has successfully entered the Thai energy market. Tony Pearson is the CEO at AH Beard. He's based in Sydney, and he will be talking about his experience navigating the administrative requirements in Thailand as an Australian exporter. Now, in the interest of time, I won't go through the speaker's bios because they've been circulated before. And in terms of format, we'll first invite each panelist to outline their key messages. Then we'll go straight to a panel discussion. We've received questions which were sent in advance to us from panelists. But if we have time and the audience still wishes to put forward their questions, please use the Q&A box and direct it to the panelists that you want to ask a question to. Now, due to that tight time frame as usual, I will remind now the speakers that they must keep their remarks very brief and to the point. So let's get the ball rolling. I'll start with the ambassador. Welcome, Alan. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And we're really looking forward to hearing from you on how Thailand is doing from a political and an economical perspective, and perhaps how it's likely to do this year and beyond.
Thank you very much, Christina, and I'm very glad to be here. Hello, everyone there in Australia and some in Bangkok too. Thailand's an important partner for Australia. It's one with significant potential for us as well. As the middle and upper classes continue to expand, their taste for foreign goods has broadened, and incremental market openings also allow us real opportunities. We, of course, Thailand's a top 10 partner. We already export a lot of energy and mineral products, agricultural products. That's growing very rapidly, and services too, highly valued by the Thais. And they send to us lots of vehicles and appliances reflecting their export focus. I just mentioned quickly in passing that we have several free trade agreements in place with Thailand. So that's the Thai-Australia FTA, ANZFTA, and now RCEP. You need to familiarise yourself with those because they will affect the environment in which you do trade. And I emphasise there, affect it not so as to complicate it, but to make it simpler and give you freer access. Just on the politics quickly, Thailand's still wrestling with a legacy since 1932 of how they share the democratic spoils. I wouldn't go into it too much except to say that politics and business are closely intertwined here. Business elites operate very closely with government. There is room for foreigners. Despite some of the challenges caused by investment policy settings, we have about 200 Australian companies resident here and 1,000 more that trade with Thailand. But if you're looking to significantly impact the Thai market, then you've got to be thinking about the politics because everything is connected to everything else. But below that level, and especially if you're cooperating with a Thai partner or an existing business partner, you can find great opportunities in this market. So it's not. I want to emphasise it's not a closed shop. It's those relationships between business and government are very close. So political parties are now preparing for an election, and I think there's a sense that that the population as a whole is tied with the current administration. It came to power in a coup in 2015. Seems to have run out of steam, a deal not really doing a whole lot, and people aren't very happy with it because of the implications of the COVID on the economy as well, and the government being really unable to address that. So there is a possibility that there will be some political disruption, some fireworks in the parliament, perhaps even some more street demonstrations. I would say, though, that without wishing to shrug those off, because they're important, the business will go on. It would be the most likely outcome, and so you don't have to think about Thailand becoming like Burma. People in Thailand, the one thing that they bring to a complex challenge politically is a willingness to compromise. That's a Thai genius. Just stopping and talking about COVID for a moment, it's important to understand where Thailand's up with that. They did a good job of controlling the pandemic in 2020. They were tracking very well. 21 was a more difficult year as Delta swept in, and basically that required the entire economy to be locked down. The one big cylinder of their economic engine that was working was tourism, and that was basically just stopped. And so I think you were talking to Michael Hellman before we came on. Hospitality has been badly affected, tourism very badly affected. They were getting something in the order of about 37 or 38 million tourists a year before COVID, and that went down to a negligible number, less than 1 million. So that's basically cut that part of the economy off at the knees. Omicron's now circulating, approximately 14,000 cases a day. It doesn't look to be having a significant impact currently, and the government seems now to be determined to keep the country open. So I think you can think about it as still almost operating in parallel with countries like Australia. The only thing I would say, though, is that they're facing a couple of annual festivals such as Songkran, where people tend to go back home to where they came from up in the country, and that has, in a couple of previous years, proved to be a super spreading event. They've got some bad Omicron infection rates in places like Phuket, which is a tourist hub favoured by Australians. And so it sits a little bit in the balance at the moment. The government wants to open and they can cope with Omicron as it is, but they're worried that there's going to be a sort of an increase in the rates of Omicron infection. That knocked the economy around it with a drop of GDP of 6.1% in 2020. It's bounced back now. Basically, it's bounced back because it had to bounce back because of the world economy getting a little bit better, opening up the economy a little bit. So things are starting to move. But just to give you a sense of it, when you speak to hotel owners, they cut their staff by more than 50%. So the idea of going to a Thai hotel and seeing lots of staff standing around in case you need to ask a question, that's not there anymore. And they've basically lifted productivity, made staff more flexible. There's no intention from hospitality owners to reboot the number of their staff when things get better. They've cut it by more than 50%, and they're going to keep it that low. So that's gives you an example of what's happening with hotels. Still don't have very good booking rates in most places, although weekends are getting better and beach resorts getting better. The manufacturing sector has bounced back to automobiles and household appliances as global demand has surged. The only point I'd make about that is talking to Australians down in the Eastern Economic Zone. Global supply chains are still a real problem for them, getting the pieces that they need for machines or for all the activities in their factory. And at the other end of the spectrum of activities, freight is a real problem for them too. So even accessing freight arrangements, certainly if they can access them, still paying for them, they're finding freight rates are up to 10 times what they were pre-pandemic. So that's supply chains and freight, a big problem. Also getting skilled labour. That's also in shortage in Thailand. So The government aspires to be a high-income country by 2037, so it's got in place a whole bunch of policies to encourage value-adding and modernising in the manufacturing sector with a focus on green technology. So if you're talking digitalisation, green technologies, then they're going to be more interested in you. Consumer demand from wealthy and middle-class Thais, of which there are many, have held up very well for higher-end Australian food products, with volumes for products like beef increasing sharply. And we've got new products coming into the market. For example, I only ever used to see Norwegian salmon in this market, high-priced, high-quality product that everybody knew. Well, in just about 18 months, we've gone from $0 to about $18 million in Australian salmon, and wherever we're meeting that Norwegian opposition, we're knocking it off. So it's worthwhile considering those sort of even well-established products to see whether you can get into the Thai market. I would say that if you're talking foodstuffs, at the start of the pandemic, when civil aviation arrangements collapsed, there was a real risk that we might be pushed off the shelves, mightn't be able to maintain our stock there. Of course, retailers are hard-hearted. They're not interested in your bad luck story. The government put some money into freight subsidies, and we not only kept Australian product on the shelves, but have extended the offer of Australian product on the shelves. So when you go to some of these big, sleek supermarkets and food halls in Thailand, they are full of Australian meat, Australian fish, pancake mixes, berries, fruit, and all sorts of seafood. On and on it goes. An absolute wealth of high-quality produce. There is room in Australia because we're known. At the moment, as you drive around Bangkok, there are huge billboards up saying 25% off Taste of Australia at top supermarkets. And so when Thais think about Australia and food, they think high quality, they think a great range, and very fresh and reliable. So I'd emphasise that even in times like this, there have been excellent opportunities and really great growth rates. Now, I mentioned it can be a challenging operating environment as well, but for Australian firms and our broader interests here, it is navigable. At a government level, we've been very active with our economic diplomacy, and we've actually proposed things to the government. We publicly worked together with the Japanese, the Germans, the UK and the US, gave the government a list of 10 things they needed to do to lift their economy's performance, and the Prime Minister threw it across the table at them and said, I want you to do that to his ministers. And so we have had some gains, and we can encourage the government to move further. People coming into this market, if they're not familiar with it, I'd encourage you to speak to the embassy. I'd encourage you to speak to Austrade. Michael Hallerman will talk in a moment. I'd also encourage you to talk to our chamber here, Auscham. It's a very active one. They've got about 390 members. Even over the last 2.5 very dreadful and difficult years, they've only lost about 10 members in total. And there's a lot of people there, a lot of Australians who will help you with what you're doing. A lot of the those who are older and now are prepared to give a lot of very useful advice. So Auscham's a must-do if you come to this market. There are a whole bunch of impediments in the Thai market, but there are a whole bunch of opportunities too. So it's a positive picture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for covering it so well. And it's interesting to see how the global supply chains and freight have been a problem for every country. We can't wait as exporters for that to go back to normal. But it's also good to see that the impact of COVID seems, although it's lingering on some parts of the economy, the overall outlook seems positive, according to you. So let's move on and hear now from Michael, because he's going to give us the commercial perspective. Welcome, Michael. Could you please talk about more deeply on the export and investment side of things and the opportunities in Thailand for Australians?
Thank you very much, Christina. And Ambassador McKinnon has described Thailand's political economy and the impact of COVID-19, as we've heard. So I'll drill down into some of those emerging commercial opportunities for Australian exporters. So Thailand remains a globally orientated, sophisticated and diverse economy with high quality physical and digital infrastructure. It's an ASEAN manufacturing hub and the largest auto producer in the region, making about 2 million cars a year despite those supply chain challenges that the Ambassador alluded to. It's also a major food exporter, and as far as we can tell, it's the only country in the world to enjoy a food trade surplus with Australia. There are 69 million consumers here, so Thailand's a large domestic market, and that's reflected in the 200 plus Australian businesses in market. Companies like BlueScope and Linfox host their largest regional operations internationally here. Thailand's e-commerce market is growing rapidly, and as in Australia, that growth has accelerated through COVID-19, with the Thai market worth more than 12 billion in 2021. And we're starting to work with online platforms like Lazada to get Australian exporters into their digital marketplaces. As in many places, the pandemic did impose significant change on the Thai economy. And as you heard, pre-COVID international tourism accounted for something like 20% of GDP. It's unlikely we'll see a return to 2019 visitor numbers and the money that came with it for some time. But on the flip side, Thailand has seen other export-orientated sectors boom, including food and medical equipment manufacturing. So even with this bumpiness, GDP per capita in Greater Bangkok, a region of about 16 million people, remains close to $20,000. That delivers real buying power across several sectors of comparative advantage for Australia. As Alan said, if you take a walk down any of a number of high-end supermarket chains, you'll see hundreds of Australian F&B products across all categories on the shelves. And here in Austrade's Bangkok office, we're working with goods and services exporters from pretty much every sector, ranging from fintechs to smart parking meters and citrus growers. We've got brands from Coles to the Natural Confectionery Company to Yana Yogurt with a recognisable presence on Thai supermarket shelves and increasingly in their online stores. The ambassador alluded to a couple of exceptional recent results that we've had, and one of those is Tasmanian salmon, which, as you heard, has now gone to a market share of about 17% of all salmon sold in Thailand in only 2 years. Beef exports have also remained very strong following recent tariff and quota reductions under TAFTA and ANZVTA. And demand for these products reflects the affluence and evolving tastes of Thai consumers, and interestingly, changing consumer behaviour brought about by COVID-19, like more people cooking from home, which was not something you'd see that often in Thailand with its famous street food culture prior to the pandemic. Education is another sector which remains a strong opportunity for Australia. Thailand's a top 10 source market for international students, and we have more than 200 partnerships with Thai universities. Of course, border restrictions in both countries imposed severe challenges over the last 2 years, but that also generated innovation. So Australian education providers have pioneered new business models in the face of those disruptions. For example, last year, the University of Newcastle and University TCC in Bangkok, along with Nurture Higher Education, launched a 2-degree program enabling students to study in Bangkok and earn a degree from both universities. And we're delighted that borders are now open for students to travel in both directions. Given Bangkok's continuing physical evolution towards being a very high-income city, we're also optimistic for the prospects of Australian firms offering services and technologies focused on the built environment. With RCEP now in force, as the ambassador said, our 3 FTAs with Thailand offer companies a significant competitive edge against many other countries. You can also leverage the extensive Australian business network in market that Alan alluded to, including that very active local Australian Thai Chamber of Commerce, or AusCham Thailand for short. Here at Austrade, we'd be delighted to hear from you and hope to see you either virtually or in the market when you can get here. If you are game to travel internationally, you'll need to quarantine for 24 hours and take a PCR on arrival, and then book into a hotel again on day 5 for a second PCR. If you do all that, you're able to work normally in Bangkok or elsewhere in Thailand. So please check out our website for more about how we can help you succeed in the Thai market. Back to you, Christina.
Well, thanks a lot, Michael. It's good to know that there are many sectors of opportunity for Australians in Thailand, and especially their focus on increased innovation, as you mentioned, and technology, which happen to be in industries where Australia, of course, can add a lot of value. So now I'd like to invite Vinod, because he's here to discuss Powerledger's experience on doing business in Thailand. But for those who don't know the company, Powerledger has invented the world's first renewable energy trading platform using blockchain. And the company was founded in Perth, so from WA, in 2016. And their cutting edge technology has quickly gained global recognition. So they now have clients across the UK, India, US, France, and of course in Thailand, which is what we want to hear. Vinod, welcome. Can you please maybe share with us not just the successful parts of the journey of Powerledger in Thailand, but also some of the challenges that you might have been faced with?
Yeah, sure. And lovely to be here. Thank you very much, Christina, and great to be part of this export briefing. Yes, very happy to share our experiences of doing business in Thailand. And as you mentioned, Christina, we started off about 3 years ago with our first project in Thailand. What we do is just to add to where you finished up. We are a company, as His Excellency Ambassador McKinnon mentioned, in the green energy digital platform space. So that's the perfect fit, which is where I think Thailand needs some solutions. So we make software for decentralized and distributed energy markets. So that is about enabling variable renewable energy on the grid, including solar, rooftop solar, batteries, and other distributed energy resources as electric vehicles and EV charging stations start to become more mainstream. So integration of these variable renewable energy and distributed energy resources in an orderly way so that it doesn't affect the functioning of the grid. And it provides a pathway for acceleration of renewable energy as a resource and obviously switching over from fossil fuel to renewable. So in this journey, our partner in Thailand is a company called BCPG, which is an offshoot from Bangchak Group, which used to be still a very large oil and gas company, but obviously had its eyes on the renewable green sort of transformation of energy sector, and created BCPG, which is itself a Thai-listed, stock exchange-listed company in Thailand now. And it was for us doing our own research as to who would be the best fit, because we were ramping up our operations in Southeast Asia, and all the research pointed out to be looking at Thailand as the place to anchor our expansion in Southeast Asia. And we almost had a perfect mission alignment with this company, BCPG, which was looking at this energy transformation not only through very large scale renewable, as in large solar farms or wind farms, which is certainly part of the mix, but also through distributed renewable resources. So our platform, which enables the solution for that distributed world, was a perfect fit for them. And they were doing their own research, and in all of this conversation, very critical is the role of Austrade, because Austrade became the agency that introduced BCPG and Powerledger, brought us together, and that landed as our sort of flourishing partnership there. So just to give a sort of reference to the kind of projects that we're actually doing in Thailand. So we have, you mentioned, one of the world's first peer-to-peer energy trading smart energy or smart urban precinct that is in partnership with Sansiri, BCPG, and Powerledger in Sukhumvit area of Bangkok. It's called T77, where an international school, a dental hospital, Habito shopping mall, a couple of condominiums, and office buildings. Many of them have rooftop solar, and they get energy first supplied from their solar, but any spare energy is shared and traded using our platform. So we are creating this energy community and a method which not only supports the functioning of the grid because all the excess energy is used up in that precinct, but also better return on investment for those who are investing in this rooftop solar. So they can get, they can trade the excess energy at a value better than what they would normally get by selling back to the grid. So of course, this is a niche and well, it actually became a solution that Thailand was looking at as it kind of started to position itself with its own renewable energy targets. And there was a clear need for a digital platform. So this peer-to-peer energy trading pilot project became almost like an iconic project, which almost made its way with all the key energy institutions: Metropolitan Electricity Authority, Provincial Electricity Authority, the energy regulators, Ministry of Energy took note of it, and actually has since introduced peer-to-peer energy trading as one of the technologies that they are looking at as part of their power development plan up to 2030. So this partnership with the local company literally gave over, a big picture opportunity for PowerLedger to expand in Thailand. And from there, that project really became so visible that World Economic Forum started advertising the uniqueness of that sharing and trading of energy. And Malaysia took note of it. Ministry of Energy Malaysia, Sustainable Energy Development Authority reached out to us and actually did a project in partnership with us, pretty much on the back of this initial pilot that we ended up doing with BCPG in Bangkok. And from there, this got visibility in India, and we're expanding in India. So this iconic project introduced to us through Austrade DFAT really has almost provided a pathway for multiple scale-up opportunities for us in Southeast Asia. Now Vietnam, Philippines, they are all aware of this iconic project. So obviously we're getting traction on the back of this partnership that we formed. And also we're doing a significant project with Chiang Mai University, as we continue to scale up there. So I suppose in my opening remarks, it is about the initial research. It is working with, as the ambassador mentioned, OSCHAM. It is leveraging connections and introductions through DFAT Austrade that becomes really critical in these interactions. But then your own research in aligning and finding the right partner. So their vision and mission was very similar to our vision and mission about distributed energy world. That brought us together. And that partnership is continued to grow from there. And for us, extremely beneficial as we're starting to see the scale-up opportunities right across the region through this project.
Thanks, Vinod. It looks like, it's obviously great to hear that your experience was positive, and it looks like finding the right partner, the local partner, was one of the great successes or the recipe for your success. And it's also looking like you've got a lot of opportunity to grow still there. And obviously your great technology was embraced by them. So good luck on the next thing. There will be questions for you, I'm sure. So we'll hear from the next guest that we have here, Tony Pearson, which I mentioned. He's from AH Beard. It's a company that specializes in manufacturing high quality mattresses, a little bit different to Vinod. And it's been around for a very long time, more than 100 years, with a global business that covers many countries, including a lot of Asian countries like China, South Korea, Papua New Guinea, and now Thailand. So Tony, thanks for joining us. What would be your views in doing business in Thailand? What has been your experience so far?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And I'll just give a little bit of background and context to AH Beard and expand on some of those words. You're right. We've actually been around for 122 years. We're in the 5th generation of the family working within the business. We are still a wholly owned Australian family business. We operate in 7 facilities across Australia and New Zealand, 6 in Australia, 1 in New Zealand. Servicing those local markets. In Australia, we would be quite consciously the 2nd by market share provider of mattresses and bedding into the Australian market. And we've got an ever-growing export market. As you said, China, Hong Kong, South Korea, Papua New Guinea are some of the fastest-growing markets for us. I have trademark and licensing agreements with partners in the United States and a few other regions. But in October 2019, we commenced export into the Thai market as well. I'll echo probably some of the comments that were made previously. Look, speaking generally about administrative and logistics requirements for the Thai market, our business has actually found it incredibly easy to do business, in comparison to some of those other markets. And underpinning that in large part are those free trade agreements that the ambassador spoke about earlier, as well as the support infrastructure that exists like Austrade and Export Council of Australia. In terms of the specifics of how to make it really easy, though, it really does come down to, as people have said previously, having the right partner in place. We were lucky enough to meet our Thai partners in early 2019. And I'm not just talking about your distribution partners here, but also your logistics and supply chain partners. Incredibly important that they have experience operating within country, and again echo some comments earlier that intertwined nature of government and industry needs to be well considered, and that partners have that access and insight as well. In terms of other considerations, you really need to spend time in country with those partners. I mean, basic considerations like appropriate ports of destination. The global supply chain that is incredibly difficult at the moment also needed consideration pre-pandemic. Picking the wrong port of destination and can double the cost of getting your products into market in some instances. You also need to have a very good understanding of how the markets operate differently in each of those jurisdictions. So again, being in country to experience it alongside people that are aware of the current culture are incredibly important, as well as your consumer market and how they interpret different products. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is the continuation of consumption, particularly in the middle market and at the top end of the market. As you mentioned, we build incredibly high quality products. We have mattresses that retail in the China market for up to 75,000 Australian dollars, and in Australian markets that average or kick in at an average of about $1,000. So we've witnessed exactly that. We've watched the continuation of purchase at that mid and wealthy segments of all of those international markets, Thailand included. So AHB was incredibly well positioned to be able to service that. But look, in general, the ability to work in Thailand has actually been quite smooth.
Thank you, Tony. Interesting, you started exporting at a bit of a difficult time just before COVID, and you're still happy with the result.
Yeah.
Obviously, the message that finding the right partner, local partner with knowledge and distribution channels is really important.
Absolutely.
Well, we come to our Q&A segment, but before I go there, can I ask the four of you, the four of our panelists, perhaps to enter your whatever email addresses the guests who are watching can contact you through, because there's been a few on the chat box, a few people wanting to reach out to all of you. So Michael, Tony, Vinod, and the ambassador, what would be in the chat box, if you could type what email can be used to reach out for the ones that are interested in talking to you. So in our Q&A segment, as I mentioned, we've received some questions from those who register, but if we have time at the end, I'll be reading out some that have been placed on the box already. So we'll see how we go with time. There's a first question here to the ambassador, to Alan. And the question is, what Thai government policies or packages are designed to encourage economic growth in the market? And which industries or sectors are likely to benefit? Alan.
Thank you. Well, I encourage people who want the answer to that to talk to Austrade as their first first port of call, but also to talk to the Board of Investment here and check out the Board of Investment of Thailand's website, which is www.boi, that's BOI as in Board of Investment, .go.th. So www.boi.go.th. It's in English. It's really helpful. And they've also got an office in Sydney. So make your acquaintance with them. Look, the Thai government has set out 8 broad aims, including promoting R&D, infrastructure, high-tech industries and the like. And they've got a bunch of incentives that you might be able to apply for, including tax holidays, breaks, exemptions from import duties on equipment, etc. They've also got a range of tax and other incentives for companies that invest in regions outside Bangkok and the southeast. They have incentives to invest in the Eastern Economic Corridor, where most of Australia's bigger companies are. There's even a separate agency to promote development in this area close to Bangkok, which has high-speed rail links being built, airport and port expansions being developed. They want this to be a major trading and transport hub, so the infrastructure is constantly being upgraded. There are some sensitive sectors and some issues around foreign ownership caps in those sectors. Thailand has for a long time wanted to be seen as a great FDI destination. They're falling down the ladder there. They used to be about 5 years ago the second most popular destination in ASEAN for FDI. They're now about 6th 5 years later. They look nervously at Vietnams of this world, so they are open to do deals. They definitely want to avoid the middle income trap, and so got a range of economic and industrial development plans to drive higher value added and green industries, especially such as electric vehicles. They're dreadfully worried about their 2 million vehicle export industry being stranded if everyone moves to EVs and they don't. So they're really working hard at that. So green, EVs, high tech, all of those things, and look at government websites and speak to Austrade and get in touch with the policies and the incentives.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. We've got a question for Michael, and it's, I guess, coming from SMEs. For smaller exporters, what's the best way for them to find the distributors, buyers, or partners in Thailand? What do you consider are the key selling points to Australia's brand in Thailand?
So I'll start with brand strength and awareness. So I think Australia is perceived as a high quality, green and safe source of both consumer products and technology. So a new SME entering the market benefits from that broad brand Australia strength here, and can do so on the back of bigger, better known brands in the market. So for example, recently we've seen in vitamins and supplements, Swisse enter the Thai market last year, and that was after Blackmores were long established and successful in the market, and that reputational strength really contributes to the success of both those brands here. To change gears to finding the right partner, particularly for a smaller firm, well, for one, our team of sector specialist business development managers here at Austrade can help. For example, we worked recently with VVP 4x4, a Thai importer and seller of premium four drive equipment, and it's now distributing about 15 Australian brands nationwide. Most of those products we introduced to that Thai importer. We also heard earlier about the importance of local networks, and Auscham and its 390 odd member companies really do bring a wealth of knowledge to how to do business in Thailand and succeed. And finally, at a very practical level, many Thais have some connection to Australia through education, travel, or family, and that can help you build a network too. So all those things can help you make that important first identification of a partner. And of course, that sits on the very important point that both Vinod and Tony made about disciplined and careful market research on the way in. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And I see that Michael has typed his email for those who want to contact Austrade directly in Thailand. We have a question for Vinod. Power Ledger offers a particularly unique product and service. How did you convince your partners or your customers in Thailand to go with your solution or approach? And do you have any key advice for Australian exporters seeking to trade with Thailand? Vinod?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I suppose part of it was what I covered, that it was about finding a partner with a similar mission and similar vision about how the energy markets are shaping up and where the solutions will lie. And it was a forward, like a progressive view, because these technologies didn't exist at the time. We're talking about 3 years ago, we landed on this project and partnership in Thailand, which is getting stronger and stronger. So yeah, number one is doing your research, working closely with Austrade in identifying potential partnerships and companies that might have similar thinking, and then building that trust. I think that's a very significant component in pretty much anywhere, but more so in Thailand, and it came up in the previous conversation as well, that you got to be there. It's not only about your solution is a good fit. They need to trust you as a company, as people that they would want to work with you. So I think all of these, we sort of broke the barrier through initial introductions and then multiple visits from Australia to Thailand, and then Thai company visiting us, almost sussing out if we were a good fit or not. So there was a lot of work from building the trust, apart from alignment of vision and technology and the product fit. So there's that part that is very critical across most of ASEAN, but more so in Thailand for sure. And I suppose in terms of challenges, we were getting, for the kind of technology that we offer, we were getting a lot of incoming leads from many companies, which may or may not necessarily would have been a good fit. And as we realized that and the other bit that actually did come out was when you build these partnerships, quite often you might have to go exclusive with one. They don't want you to be shared with others. They want to represent you, be your partner that will carry your brand forward. So you got to be prepared for making those kinds of calls on your business operations, and would you go with one company if you find the right partner. So in our case, we were, I suppose, very lucky. We absolutely found very like-minded company with the kind of vision and the growth plan and how they wanted to implement that in not just in Thailand but in Indochina. So we are progressing in multiple countries with them. I suppose that's all I could respond to in for that question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I mean, exclusivity, as you mentioned, only works well if you find the right partner, and it's a question of also building the relationship. And what you did is incredibly good, going there physically and visiting the face-to-face to build the trust, and the relationship is very good. We have now a question to Tony. Tony, how did you make the connections with your partners in Thailand? And from your experience, what were the pitfalls? What do Australian exporters must watch out for?
Sure. Well, our Thai partners, we actually met them first, like many Asia Pacific businesses. A lot of Thais will spend time in China at trade fairs, whether that's looking for product innovation, new services, partners, and the like. So we were in China at the Shanghai International Furniture Fair, supporting one of our China customers with our AHB branded product. The Thai partner had attended that stand. They were very impressed with the product and the positioning in some of those Southeast Asian markets. And so while they'd made an initial contact, it was really just superficial contact to start with. Unbeknownst to us, what they immediately did was fly out to Australia and spend time in the Australian market looking how we represent our products and our brand within this market. And once they'd done those couple of pieces of research, they actually approached us directly to express an interest to be a partner in the Thai market. Look, in terms of some of the pitfalls, generally, I think the largest pitfall we often make is not really understanding the cultural differences that occur, as I spoke about briefly before, from a consumer perspective or from a operational perspective, way business operates, even down to the simple administrative and logistics requirements. One of the real interesting insights in that regard, by the way, was the Thai economy and the Chinese economy are so closely linked. You know, they are really close trading partners. And what we observed was the way a Chinese import product is received in Thailand is very different to the way it's received into Australia. And so in simple terms, it's actually seen as a higher quality product when it's Chinese products imported into Thailand. And so the points that were made before about Australia being seen as an incredibly high quality provider of products and services, that's true. However, you can't just take that for granted. You know, you need to continue to significantly demonstrate that genuineness, authenticity, and points of difference in the Thai market. It won't be just taken for granted.
Yeah, that's a very important consideration, Tony. We have time for more questions, so I think this one could be directed to the ambassador. Alan, there's a question here for businesses looking to enter the broad Asian market. They're asking if you find that businesses that engage with Thailand could be able to be easily engage with other Asian member countries as well, or use it as a platform.
They're all very different markets, but they're covered pretty much by the same, basically ANCIRTA picks up many of them in the same free trade agreement. I guess the only comment I'd make is it's easier to hub out of Thailand into all of those regional markets than it is to, say, hub out of Phnom Penh to all of the regional markets. So they're not the same, but if you establish yourself successfully in the Thai market, you would naturally look to the ones next door to add on.
Thank you. Are there any resources available to support prospective Australian exporters seeking to enter the Thai market? Perhaps Michael from Austrade could reply to this one.
Sure. So we've already talked about some of the networks and resources on the ground through organisations like Auscham, but I will take this opportunity to give a plug to Austrade's Export Market Development Grants Program, which is probably well known to many ECA members, but EMDG provides grants that helps Australian businesses grow their exports in international markets. It's particularly focused on SMEs, and it allows some financial support for SMEs to get to market and promote their goods and services globally. If you've never heard of that, all you need to do is Google EMDG for Export Market Development Grants, because it's a very long-running, successful program. It's recently had some additional resources and reforms made to it. On the ground here in Thailand, after Austrade qualifies an exporter or a client, as we would say, we're able to provide some bespoke market entry services to an exporter, and those can include things like market intelligence or potential partner identification, as you heard Vinod refer to before, and also some business cultural advice, which, as Tony alluded to, is a really important part of understanding a market. And I guess when you come to us, you get a fusion between an Australian approach through our Australian staff and our local experts, our Thai BDMs, who in many cases have decades of experience in the market. So I encourage you all to check out our website, austrade.gov.au, if that's of interest, or my email is in the chat. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you, Michael. A question for Vinod. What was your experience in building connections in Thailand? I mean, you mentioned you found a very good local partner. I suppose, how did you go about with that? And is there anything that perhaps you wish you knew beforehand that would have helped with the process?
Yes, I think a couple of aspects, if we were better prepared, would have been much easier in those transactions. So one of those is around cultural understanding. Tony mentioned that as well. We were taking it as any other market to start with, that here is our solution, and that was the basis of progressing our conversation. But we could sense that there was an appetite to know more about who we were and what our bigger plans were for the region. So it came out very clearly that a local partner would partner with you and be a very strong partner, but they really need to build that trust and have a clear understanding of who you are. At the same time, you need to build that cultural awareness, understanding as to what works for them. And a lot of these conversations, for example, we would receive teams of visitors from Thailand, and not only from direct potential partners, but also their associates and whoever they thought should be part of that conversation. So that cohort of who you were talking to was quite often beyond just the focus group that you would normally think would be part of the business conversations. So this sort of cultural understanding would have been, and also the amount of time it might take to really foster and seal the relationship. So from beginning to, even though in this instance it was like a very aligned vision and mission, and it still took significant time for us to get to a agreement on how we will progress further. So and that's quite often it might differ in different industry segments, but my now knowing the market understanding is that it is usually long cycle. It takes time to build that close partnerships. So you need to factor in these types of realities that you'll probably be faced with in your interactions in general in Southeast Asia, but certainly in Thailand. Yeah.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Vinod. Tony, a similar question, I guess, considering how each market has its own culture and preferences, did you have a particular strategy on your approach with the Thai demographic? And out of interest, while you're there, can you also maybe let us know if you had to adapt your product at all to the Thai customer taste, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's so many examples I could give in terms of cultural variations and preferences, but I'll give a couple of the big ones. So, first on the distribution channels. In Australia, we go and purchase a mattress in a particular way. It's typically in a specialist retailer, and in Thai, there's actually a bigger proportion of direct to consumer, not just retailers, but manufacturing retailers. And so the interaction with the product and the distribution to the local consumer happens in a unique way. While there are some big box stores, they're not as prevalent. Local stores and specialists through that manufacturing and retail combination seems to be more prevalent. And the importance of trade shows locally. And so there is a huge peak, in particular our industry, in bedding and furniture, around particular trade shows and hubs. So knowing your peaks and troughs of seasonality and how your product's going to be transacted, that was really important. In terms of the product himself, yes, we have to adapt for every market. In way of an example, in Thailand, one of the components that's used in bedding is latex. Thais manufacture latex, and so there's a higher proportion of full latex mattresses in that market. AHB predominantly in their ultra premium range use a lot of innerspring, and so there's an education process required, and yes, there's an adaptation of the actual product itself. All markets have different feel preferences, very, very firm versus very, very soft, and obviously the variations between that for individual selection. And so, yes, there's a lot of modification required for the actual product itself.
Have you tapped into the online sales, or is that difficult with mattresses?
It's not difficult, and we don't directly, our partners do. What we'll typically find is online's important always, whether it's for education or transacting. There's still a high preference for a mattress to be purchased in-store where it can be experienced. But what you must do is provide a platform for people to become aware of what I still call probably the least known commodity on the planet. The mysterious rectangle box. Very, very few of us actually understand what it takes to make a really quality one, but it has such a significant impact on your wellness.
Thank you. I guess before we wrap up, I just wanted to, because we haven't had enough time to talk about e-commerce, but I'll just ask Michael very briefly, how is e-commerce growing in Thailand, if it's at the same speed as other countries in Southeast Asia or ASEAN?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And perhaps what's most interesting about the e-commerce journey in Thailand over the last 2 years is that you've seen these very large, often ASEAN-wide platforms like Lazada penetrating much further down into the middle class. So e-commerce was a well-established way of consumers, particularly from the wealthy consuming class, purchasing products in Thailand for several years, but with a very robust approach to social distancing and mask wearing and all those things. We've seen a huge shift to the point that it's now very common for all Thais, including in some cases Thais who are not even using formal banking, to have access to e-commerce platforms. So very much as you'd see in Australia, you can get pretty much anything delivered, and occasionally you will see a large item arrive on the back of a small motorbike, but for the most part it's a pretty efficient distribution system, including last mile. So very much an omni-channel market, and worth considering whether you can get your product onto the right online platform. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael. This is all the time we have today for our Q&A. So I'd like to take this opportunity before we go to once again express our great appreciation to all of the speakers from Thailand, from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Austrade, and in Australia from Power Ledger and AHB. Also, a special thanks to DFAT for their continuing support of our Global Market Insights briefings. Our Market Insight reports are available if you want to read them on DFAT's website. And if you have any questions or you require any export assistance, don't hesitate. You can contact the Export Council of Australia. And if you're looking for government assistance or any advice, you can go to the website business.gov.au, or you may call 13 28 46. Now, we're looking forward to next month's webinar because it will be on the UK, so I hope everyone can join us. And we'll conclude today's session with wishing everyone best wishes on your business ventures with Thailand. Take care and see you soon.